The adaptation of The Last of Us kicks off in 1968 with a television broadcast. It's a discussion about what would happen if there was a pandemic. One of the epidemiologists on this panel isn't worried about bacteria or a virus. What he's worried about is fungi. He basically lays out exactly what is going to happen in 2003. That fungi take over the host, disorienting them and eventually using them as puppets. Fungi do it with animals all the time, but they haven't been able to do it with human beings because of the body temperature. Fungi can't live above 94 degrees. The epidemiologist hypothesizes that what if that were to change? What if the world were to change and all of a sudden fungi could, in fact, live inside a human body? Now, it's all conjecture, but you fast forward to 2003 and that is what's happening in Jakarta. Back over in Texas, though, Jakarta seems like a world away to Joel, his brother Tommy, and his daughter Sarah. They're not worried about Jakarta because that day is Joel's birthday, although he'd rather soon forget about it. Sarah isn't willing to let him just forget, though. Now that it's just them two, she's got to look out for her dad. Now, they hear about what's going on in Jakarta, but the severity of it isn't out there yet. They then just get ready to go about their day, with Joel and Tommy going off for work and Sarah going to school. She does get pestered by the next-door neighbors to stop on by. She kind of keeps them company, but as she's gotten older, she no longer really wants to go over there and just hang out with a bunch of elderly people. She gets guilt-tripped into doing it, though, by her dad, so later that day, she's got plans. The trip over to the neighbors, though, is going to have to wait, because after school, she heads downtown to get her dad a birthday present. Her dad has an old watch that he's really fond of, but it's broken, he never got it fixed, so she gets it fixed for him. But as the guy is fixing it in the watch shop, his wife frantically comes in and says, "We're closed. We have to close," and then she starts speaking in a foreign language. Luckily for Sarah, she's able to get the watch before the wife all but throws her out of the store, but it definitely has Sarah thinking. This store isn't supposed to close until 7 p.m., and there are a lot of police activity downtown. Either way, she has to get to the neighbors, and she does that. The couple is currently watching after one of their parents, who is very, very old. Sarah keeps the wife company by baking cookies with her, and even gets something out of it because she's able to borrow a DVD of one of her dad's favorite movies. As she's leaving, though, something really weird is going on with the family dog. It's just staring at the elderly woman. When she steps out of the house, it gets even weirder with fighter jets flying overhead. Something's going on, but she just doesn't know what it is. When Joel eventually does come home late that night, Sarah gives him his present, which he loves, and then they start watching that movie. At some point, though, Sarah dozes off, and Joel gets woken up by a phone call from his brother. Tommy got arrested, and he needs to get bailed out. Joel carries Sarah upstairs, puts her in bed, and then heads out to go get his brother. But Sarah is awoken at 2 a.m. to an explosion. She's not sure what's going on, and when she turns on the TV, there's just a national alert, issuing an emergency action notification. She then hears scratching at the door, and it's the next-door neighbor's dog. When she heads outside to see why the dog is outside, she notices that the next-door neighbor's door is wide open. She travels in, and she's horrified what she finds. The elderly couple that's next door are both dead, and it's at the hands of the elderly woman, the mother. She's been taken over, and she's currently chomping on her daughter's neck. It's absolutely terrifying. Sarah runs outside, and that's when Tommy and Joel pull up and tell her to get in the truck immediately. They need to get the hell out of there. They don't quite know where to go. They decide to go to the highway, but when they get there, they find out that everybody had that same idea. It's completely backed up. On the drive, Sarah starts questioning what's going on, if it's terrorism, if they themselves are sick, but Joel doesn't have any answers to this. They start trying to make their way out of the city any way possible, going down desolate roads, side streets, and then they get to a town's main street, and it's chaos. Complete anarchy in the streets. They start backing up the truck to go the other way, and that's when they realize that they can't go any further because there is a plane literally falling out of the sky. It crashes, explodes, and it throws their truck. Everybody's alive, but Sarah's ankle is pretty banged up. She can't really walk. Joel has to carry her. Tommy is separated from Joel and Sarah. Joel and Sarah in an alley, and Tommy's on the other side. He can't get through. He tells him to go to the river, and he'll meet him there. Joel starts to do that, carrying his daughter, while also trying to avoid the infected. That's when he's stopped by an army officer. He tells the guy, "We're not sick. We're fine. Her ankle's banged up. She needs a doctor." When the officer alerts his commander about this, the commander tells him to shoot them. Joel realizes what's going on at the last second and throws himself and Sarah down a hill. He's then saved by his brother, who shoots the army officer in the head. But it's not without casualty. Sarah is hit, and she's mortally wounded. Unfortunately for the two, there's nothing they can do about it. We fast forward 20 years later to present day, where Joel has made his way to Boston. And Boston does not look like the Boston you and I know. It looks like a mix between a refugee camp and a war zone. Boston's governing body is run by something called Fedra. It's basically the presiding government. They set up a quarantine zone with walls, a curfew, odd jobs like burning bodies and sanitation. It's definitely not the best life, especially if you knew the old life. But just like with every government, there's a resistance. These people are called the fireflies. They've been going at Fedra for years, ever since the quarantine zone was set up, really. It's an underground army-type group of civilians that don't like the dictatorship. Joel isn't a part of them. Tommy, though, is. And his involvement with the Fireflies has put a strife between the two. Joel seems like he just wants to be a normal civilian. That doesn't mean he doesn't have an odd job. He pushes pills. One of his best customers is a Fedra officer. While everybody is focused on an execution that day, Joel sneaks off into an alley with this officer and makes a deal. As the officer is putting the pills in his pocket, Joel asks him about an update on a vehicle. The officer's helping Joel get a vehicle, but the officer does warn him that vehicles are crappy. They're available for a reason, and they don't have a battery. Joel knows all that. He's okay with it. He just wants a vehicle. Right before the two part ways, the officer gives him some advice. Stay off the streets tonight. Fireflies have been blowing stuff up all week. The boss has us working doubles, and it's really easy to confuse a civilian with a firefly. The next stop Joel goes to is the radio tower. It's a very popular place. It's really the only place where people in Boston can communicate with the outside world and loved ones. Joel's looking for an update because he put a radio signal out to Tommy, but he hasn't heard back. It's been 3 weeks, and it's never taken Tommy more than a day to respond. Joel's not willing just to let the radio technician tell him, yeah, I'm sure Tommy's okay. No, he wants to go after Tommy. He pulls out a map and makes the radio technician show him exactly where to go, and Tommy would be located in Wyoming. The radio tech tries to talk him out of this. While the quarantine zone sucks, it is the safest spot. In the outside world, you've got raiders, slavers, and on top of it, you've got the infected. All of that seems like a really good reason as to why Joel should go after his brother. After he gets the location, he heads home and he sleeps. He's woken up in the middle of the night by his roommate / girlfriend / best friend, whatever they are, but her name's Tess. She has had quite a day. Joel and Tess had made a deal with a local scumbag to secure a car battery, but that guy screwed him over. He took their money and he sold the battery to somebody else. He kept Tess locked up in a basement because he was worried about the repercussions when Joel found out. Tess was able to escape when a Firefly truck exploded right outside of the building. It was pretty jarring for Tess, and then she walked out into the street into a firefight where she was arrested for suspicion of being a Firefly member. They finally let her go in the middle of the night when they realized she isn't a part of that group. When Joel wakes up the next morning and he sees Tess's face, he's pretty concerned when Tess fills him in on everything that happened. The fact the car battery was sold to somebody else is not the news that Joel wanted. Especially with not hearing from Tommy, he needs that car battery to get to him. Tess realizes that Joel is extremely angry at the moment, so she tries to calm him down. She reassures him that they'll find out who this guy sold the battery to, but they'll do it in a quiet manner. Tess and Joel head out in the streets. They start asking around, and it doesn't take too long to figure out where this guy is headed with their battery. They figure they can take the subway tunnel and sneak up in the building and catch him by surprise. While Joel and Tess go after their battery, not too far away in a building is Firefly HQ. Firefly Boston chapter is led by a woman named Marlene. And currently, she has a teenage girl locked up in a room. And no one can quite figure out why. Every day somebody comes in and gives this girl a bunch of questions, make sure she's okay, but then they don't let her leave. And this girl has a whole lot of attitude. She tells them that her name is Veronica, but that's not true. Her name's actually Ellie. And Marlene has big plans for Ellie. She's been using the Fireflies to set off explosions all over the city away from their home base. That night, every one of the Fireflies is going to gather and leave the quarantine zone, taking Ellie west. Ellie, though, has no idea this is happening. She's confused as to why she's changed up, and Marlene sits down and has a talk with her. Ellie pleads with Marlene to let her go, saying, "I'm not going to tell anybody about this operation." And Marlene looks at her and says, "What, you're that desperate to get back to a Fedra school?" But no, Ellie isn't. She reminds Marlene that she had no choice but to go to that school. It's a school for orphans. Fedra put her there. And Marlene says, "No, Fedra didn't put you there. I did, Ellie." When Marlene uses Ellie's real name, that's when Ellie knows that Marlene's legit. Ellie is confused as to why the fireflies would stick her with Fedra. I mean, they are the fireflies' enemy after all. And Marlene explains that that's where she was safest. And up until a few weeks ago, that was true. She was safe. Till she left the school, venturing out. Ellie still doesn't understand, though, why Marlene won't let her go. And Marlene tells her, "It's because you have a greater purpose. We're leaving tonight with you." She then tells Ellie what that purpose is, but warns her that Ellie can't tell anybody about this. If she does, it could cost her her life. And we, as the audience, aren't privy to that information. There's then a knock at the door, and Marlene finds out that her car battery has arrived, although the deal goes sideways quick. The battery wasn't good. This caused the two sides to start shooting at each other, and Marlene ended up getting hit. As she's getting patched up, they get some unexpected visitors. Joel and Tess. Both sides are very shocked to see the other. While Tess and Joel aren't a part of the Fireflies, they know Marlene. They don't have a bad relationship with her. When Joel and Tess show up, Ellie pops out of a door and attacks them. She doesn't know that Marlene knows these two. They start talking about how they both were in the market for that battery. Joel gets a little chippy when Marlene brings up Tommy's name because he blames Marlene for driving a stake between the two. But it's Marlene's second in command that points out that gunfire is going to bring Fedra agents to their doorstep. They got to get a move on. Marlene looks at both Joel and Tess and explains that they were planning on moving Ellie out of the quarantine zone that night, but she's not getting anywhere. She's dealing with a bullet wound. So she's come up with the idea in that moment that Joel and Tess can do it. Joel is completely against it. He tells Marlene, "We don't smuggle people." But Marlene continues anyway, telling them that there's a team of fireflies waiting for them at the old state house. If they get her there safely, those fireflies will give them what they need. And we're talking a fueled-up truck, guns, anything. Joel and Tess are pretty suspicious, and they do ask her, "What's so important about this girl?" But Marlene just tells them, "She's cargo to you." After a quick discussion on the matter, Joel and Tess agree to take Ellie with them. They need the truck. It's as simple as that. Ellie, though, really doesn't want to go, but Ellie really doesn't have a choice. Joel takes Ellie back to his apartment. They gotta wait till nightfall to get out of the quarantine zone. Ellie's pretty smart. She's able to figure out a radio code really quickly. They play songs over the radio to tell people what's needed. If it's a 60s song, that means there's nothing in. If it's a song from the 70s, it means there's new stuff in. And if it's 80s, well, that just has an X on it. But she's able to weasel out of Joel that 80s means trouble. Later that night, the group heads out when it's dark. Using a series of secret tunnels, they're almost out of the quarantine zone when they're caught by a Fedra agent. But it happens to be that Fedra agent that Joel sells pills to. Unfortunately, the agent's not willing to let Joel slide. He's actually pissed off that Joel didn't heed his warning about staying off the streets. He's ready to call it in. They offer this guy whatever he wants, but he doesn't take any of it. And with a gun pointed at Joel and a teenage daughter by his side, he gets flashbacks of what happened between him and Sarah, and he takes matters into his own hands, bum-rushing this guy and beating the ever-loving crap out of him. The device, though, that soldier uses to see if people are sick was sitting right next to Ellie, and it's red. Tess starts freaking out, showing Joel the discovery, but Ellie starts saying, "No, I'm not sick, guys. I swear." She then shows them a bite mark on her arm, saying, "This was from 2 weeks ago. Look at me, I'm fine." They don't have a long time to discuss it, though, because Fedra is on their ass, and they have to get the hell out of the quarantine zone. Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry, it'll be up in a day or two.